The problem with the Braves, or the Indians, or the fucking Redskins, is that they're all reducing an entire ethnicity of people to t-shirt friendly mascots. First of all, the fact that indigenous Americans were ever referred to as Indians is emblematic of the entire issue. Although American Indian has become part of accepted terminology that includes Native American, indigenous people, and simply Native or indigenous, the term Indian was a misnomer. But it was a misnomer that America never bothered to correct, because indigenous Americans didn't matter to them. Their identity, their culture, their entire existence is incidental. A footnote in the margins of white history. They're called Indians because that's what white people decided to call them, and America as a whole has never felt compelled to correct or even acknowledge that. This country is so willfully oblivious to the cultural erasure of Native Americans that we have a professional baseball team called the Indians with a minstrel character as its mascot. Try to imagine a professional sports team doing this with literally any other race. Try to picture it, if your imagination will but allow it. A World Series showdown between the Colorado and the Chicago. We're not even going to do a funny graphic for that because we'd have to immediately cancel ourselves. The point is, the very notion of professional sports teams being named after racial slurs is so grotesquely offensive, we can't even joke about it. And yet, we have been selling tickets to the Washington fucking Redskins since 1933. And that name didn't change until the year 2020. The Redskins. That's not old-timey racism. That's contemporary to the minute racism. That's the breaking news of racism. We should wince every time someone says that word like we're listening to Hulk Hogan finding out his daughter is dating a black man. Good point, monkey. You've always been my rock. Given conservative media's hyperbolic reaction to anything that even calls the sacred infallibility of whiteness into question, can you imagine the uproar if the Seattle Snowflakes went to the Super Bowl? How many weeks of television would Tucker Carlson devote to sweaty, pink-faced rage rants about the Minnesota Lily Whites? Imagine how many pearls would be clutched at a local PTA meeting over a child wearing a cracker-eating honkies jersey to school. Dare your mind to conjure Ben Shapiro's twerpy meltdown over the world champion Wilmington White Devils. Can you imagine the endless stream of outrage tweets he'd smash out with his busy fingers if a professional sports team had an exaggerated racist caricature of a peach-faced European as their mascot? Oh, right. But you get where I'm coming from here. The point is, it's not respectful to name a sports team after an ethnic group of people. It's trivializing them. It's not respectful to do the tomahawk chop when your team is doing well. There's nothing respectful about launching into a racist stereotype every time your team scores a point. That is no different from a stadium full of people in blackface chanting Mammy. You're reducing an entire culture to a mascot, alongside goofy animal shit like the Chicago Bulls and the Toronto Raptors. That's dehumanizing. These team names aren't referencing a profession like the Steelers or the Oilers, or even a specific regional moniker like the Yankees. It's just the Braves, or the Indians, or the goddamn the other one. Right-wing doofuses like Ben Shapiro take to Twitter to argue that the real tragedy over changing the name of the Cleveland Indians is the disgrace we're bringing to the real-life American Indian after whom the team was named.
Supposedly, or allegedly, the Cleveland Indians were originally named after a guy named Louis Sockalexis, who was of the Penobscot tribe of Maine, an actual Native American. He played for the Cleveland Spiders at the time, from 1897 to 1899. And he was so popular that they kind of changed the nickname of the team to the Indians. Has there ever been an implication that the Cleveland Indians name was chosen to mock Indians? As in Native Americans? No, but once again, it's all performative virtue signaling. And then when you notice that there's an attempt to paint everything as historically racist and necessarily changing, when you paint it that way and then people say, well, you know, that's kind of weird and unnecessary, you're like, why are you even noticing? Why do you even care? I care because you cared enough to change it. In the same way that I cared when you changed the name of the Washington Redskins, because if you cared enough to change it, I care enough to wonder why.
Yummy. So Ben asks aloud if there's been any implications that the name of the Cleveland Indians was created to mock Native Americans before answering the question himself, and then freaking out about why people would wonder why he's so freaked out about this. And I don't know, maybe instead of deciding what the answer was, he could have looked it up. Had he done that, he would have learned that the story he's telling about Louis Sockalexis is not at all true. I don't mean it's up for debate, but rather common knowledge among anyone actually studying the history of the team. Yes, Louis Sockalexis was a real baseball player, and he was an American Indian. But the trivia that the Indians were named after him because they liked him so much is not true. It came from a book from the 1940s with no history before then. The truth comes from 1914, when team owner Charles Summers hired several sports writers to come up with a new team name. The Cleveland Indians were what they landed on, and the next day the newspapers announced the change accompanied by this extremely racist cartoon. And in fact, when one sociologist went through all the promotional material for this team, she found that Louis Sockalexis was not even mentioned. Not once, until 1968, right after Native Americans began to protest the mascot. It was, by all historical accounts, a racist title meant to mock the fact that they had a Native American on their team that was later levied as a defense against accusations. Exactly like Ben Shapiro did. Congratulations, Ben, on following the proud American tradition of puppeting famous minorities to support things they would abhor. Also, the tradition of not Googling something before having an opinion on it.
The Guardians, the prison guard. Like, what are the words that pop to your mind when you hear Guardians? Like, the only good one is Batman, like Silent Guardian or Silent Protector, or whatever it is. Cleveland Guardians. And again, all they're doing is they're trying to look for the homonymic relationship between Indians and Guardians there to try and get them through this. But yeah.
Hey, Ben, it's named after the guardians of traffic statues on Cleveland's Hope Memorial Bridge that literally leads to their stadium. But I guess you're not actually interested in that, are you? But this isn't just about Ben and his little feelings getting hurt, because America in general loves to habitually fetishize Native Americans in popular culture and pretend that we're honoring them. If they're not stereotyped sports mascots, they're wise and stoic guides, or fierce and noble warriors, or they're the bad guys. They're always one step away from being explicitly magical, unless they are explicitly magical. We made a movie called Renegades, where Lou Diamond Phillips hypnotizes a cop using Native American superpowers. And much like that film we all know and remember, they usually only exist to serve as supporting characters in a story about some white guy who shows just enough humility towards their mystical ways to make us feel good about lobbing a bunch of Oscars at his giant gleaming forehead. One of the most visible Native American characters of the past 10 years was played by Johnny Depp with a dead bird on his head. And that sucks. Just look at it sucking right before our eyes. And like, is it too much to ask that perhaps by giving thanks this year, we collectively recognize how weird and bad this is? That we have spent decades, up until the 2010s, not giving a flying about racist caricatures or brown-faced depictions when it came to this one specific group of people. That's like, so weird. And that lack of respect doesn't stop at sports teams or movies starring people in brownface. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.